Last week, a report saying that the Chinese military is going to drastically reduce the number of troops to 1 million and less, especially for the land forces, has excited world community, especially the community looking after the security and military aspects in think tanks and some of the militaries that watch the Chinese PLA very closely. Is that excitement really valid? Is it something new that the Chinese military is doing? Not really. The Chinese military has been in the process of modernizing, restructuring and resizing its forces at least since 2013, if not before. So what is this restructuring and resizing all about? I am Nitin Gokhale and you are watching Strategic News International. To take you through the restructuring and resizing of the Chinese military and especially the People's Liberation Army, let me take you back to 2013 when the Central Military Commission of the Chinese state actually decided that it needs to have a more modern, versatile and agile military to take on challenges that could be posed in future wars. So they decided that the land forces, the PLA Navy and the PLA Air Force, PLAF as they call it, will not get the kind of treatment that they used to get earlier. The land forces were always the most important element in the Chinese military, especially after the People's Republic of China was established in 1949. They believed in large numbers. The Chinese PLA was modeled on the Soviet structures, especially of the land forces, and the Chinese believed in putting in numbers in any war or any battle. So the land forces always had the primacy. But towards the last decade of the last century, the Chinese watched the first Gulf War in 1991 and realized that technology is going to play a major role in future wars, and they started accordingly studying and planning for a restructuring in the 21st century. But it took them another 10 years, and in the earlier part of the 2010s, in 2010, 2011, a blueprint was evolved where the Chinese decided that they needed a much larger, a much versatile and much technologically advanced Navy, that is the PLA Navy, and they needed the PLA Air Force if they had to be any match to the American might. The Chinese typically look at the Americans as their main competitor and not anybody else in the world. So they started giving importance to the PLA Navy and the PLA Air Force. Simultaneously, another old, what is called the rocket forces, this formation which looks after the Chinese missiles or the Strategic Forces Command as they are known elsewhere in the US Army or in the Indian Army, started getting more importance, more money and more manpower, because the Chinese believed that a standoff situation from where they can fire missiles into the enemy territory or take out ships or hit ships and air force planes is a more effective way rather than the old way of kinetic battles or hand-to-hand combat between troops, and therefore the rocket forces became more important than the land forces. Having done that, in 2013-14 when President Xi Jinping took over, he started recognizing the need to cut the number of troops down to manageable levels so that the money that was saved there and the kind of technological evolution that was coming in could be implemented in a more younger force which is more aware of the technological advancements in the world. And therefore he also formed the what is called the Strategic Support Force, which means that this force, unlike the rocket forces or the land and the air force and the navy forces, would look after the future domains, that is cyber, space and electromagnetic fields or electromagnetic domain, where the Chinese were making huge advances and making the forces much more aligned to the future needs. This is what was done. So, in keeping with all this and the plan that was evolved, the CMC, the Central Military Commission, decided that the number of troops in the land forces or the army as it is conventionally known should be less than 1 million. At one point in time, the Chinese had 2.5 million standing army. That has been gradually reduced to be about 1 million in the next couple of years. That means that the land forces will only take care of the land border which the Chinese have with India, and of course the PLA Navy becomes much more expeditionary, and the PLA Air Force of course gets more modern aircraft and more missiles, and becomes much more effective in combat if it comes to the combat with its adversaries. The missile forces of course remain as important as before, but what the Chinese have now concentrated on is to improve its capability in cyber, in space, and precision weapons that they are developing. In cyber, the Chinese are anyway known as the innovators and have a very effective offensive wing in cyber warfare. In space, the Chinese have demonstrated that they have the anti-satellite capability of shooting down a satellite in space if need be. And of course, in this new precision guided weapons and in the new smart weapons as they are called, the Chinese are now taking a lead as far as technology is concerned. So what does it mean for India and in a bigger way for the Americans? First, let's talk about India. Remember, the Chinese or the India-China border is nearly 4,000 kilometers plus. It is the world's largest and longest disputed border, unsettled border, and there is always a possibility, as we saw in Dolam in 2017, or Doklam as it is more popularly known, or as we used to see in earlier years in Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh, where standoff between Indian and Chinese troops takes place regularly. But that has been reduced after the Wuhan summit, but that does not obviate, that does not rule out any such future standoff, because not ruling out the possibility of a standoff, and therefore the army will always remain important for the Chinese as far as India is concerned. But the Chinese are not looking at India alone as its adversary. The Chinese are looking at the Americans. The Chinese are looking at the Taiwanese, who are backed by the Americans, and they are also looking at the South China Sea as a future area of conflict, where they have altered the geography. They have so with all this, are the Chinese becoming a formidable military machine? Well, their plans are in place. They have a definite roadmap ahead to become a very effective combat ready and future ready army, navy, air force, and of course a strategic force. But given the fact that the Chinese have not fought a war since 1979, almost for 40 years, their last war that they fought was with the Vietnamese, where they got a bloody nose from the Vietnamese in 79 and had to retreat. After that, the Chinese haven't really fought a war, and therefore all those who closely watch the Chinese military always have this question: have they been tested in real battle? Have they really tested their own troops and their psychological profile when it comes to contact battle or kinetic battle? That's the question all military specialists always ask about the Chinese. They may have latest gadgets, they may have good technology, but they do not have the experience of being really involved in battle, like say the Indians are in CICT environment in Jammu and Kashmir in the northeast, or they had in IPKF 30 years ago. But the Americans have in Afghanistan, or they had in Iraq. Those kind of experiences elude the Chinese troops. And that's where I think everyone looks at the Chinese weakness, that they need to be tested in real battlefield conditions. It's not just good to have very good plans, logistics support, formidable economy which supports this kind of military expansion where the budget is over $250 billion a year. All that is fine as far as the Chinese military is concerned. But while they are on the right path to modernize, right path to become a very structured, very combat-ready force, their effectiveness will be tested when a real battle is joined. Whether that day or that age will come, we'll have to wait and watch. But at the moment, I would reserve, or even military specialists would reserve a judgment as far as the Chinese military's effectiveness in real battle is concerned. Their numbers, their technological advancement, their plans are absolutely perfect if one really has to give them an assessment, or one really has to assess the Chinese planning and roadmap for military modernization. But the jury is still out whether the Chinese will be able to have a similar kind of impact commensurate with what they have spent on the military when it comes to real battle. On that note, this is Nitin Gokhale signing off for Strategic News International. Keep sending your comments, feedback, and if there are any suggestions, they are also welcome.